Hello, ladies and gentlemen, dear aspirants. Welcome to this video lecture series on behalf of Project SATHEE. I am Dr. Animesh, and today we are continuing our discussion on offenses against human body, offenses against life. And today we are unfortunately at a juncture where we have to discuss this harsh reality of our society, that is crime against women. And it is one of the most pertinent issues, one of the most heinous crimes imaginable, and obviously we have to understand the intricacies of it, but at the same time it requires a bit mature and nuanced understanding on the part of the students as well, that it requires a certain degree of sensitivity. So that is something that we will intend to have. We will try to have some clarity on this issue as well. So moving on, obviously, in the first part of this particular lecture, that is crime against women, we are specifically talking about rape. That is a very heinous crime and a very serious problem in our society, that many women are subjected to sexual assault by strangers, sometimes by people known to them. And obviously, as a society, we are constantly trying to have more stringent laws and try to prevent those events from happening. But sometimes we face problems in that as well. But straight away, let's move on to what constitute rape. What's the primary meaning of rape? Now, obviously, the rape has two aspects. There are two things that constitute the offense of rape. Number one is sexual act, and number two is consent, lack of consent. A sexual act which will otherwise be absolutely fine becomes rape if it falls within the domain of non-consensual act. Now, there are various colors of consent, there are various conditions by which a particular woman's consent is vitiated or her consent is not considered valid, that we will discuss in this particular lecture. So, meaning of rape, it has two elements. The rape has two elements. Number one is sexual act, and number two is the very lack of consent. Then, in this particular video, we'll also discuss aggravated rape. Sometimes rape, while it is in itself is a very heinous offense, there can be circumstance which makes the act even more heinous. So that is what we call aggravated rape. So aggravated form of rape we'll discuss. We'll learn that what all circumstances make this already heinous offense even more heinous. और भी बढ़ा करके अगर इस heinous offense को हम देखें, that is considered aggravated form of rape. Okay. Then we'll also discuss what's the punishment for rape under the laws that we have, and then we'll also learn about punishments under POCSO Act. Now, POCSO Act is also a legislation, very important legislation, that is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2030. In 2030, this legislation came into being, which provided punishments for sexual acts against the minor. It's a very stringent act. It's a very effective law, by the way. There are you will find that those who are charged with POCSO are tried speedily, and the prosecution moves at a very good pace, and society is very sensitive about sexual acts against the minors. That we'll learn. Obviously, this is the overview of our lecture. So first we'll learn the meaning of rape, what constitutes rape. Now, yes, we'll talk about sexual act first. Now, the very simple idea is, who can be prosecuted for rape? Now, the simple answer, only a man can be prosecuted for rape against a woman. This is very important to understand. It is where we differentiate normal sexual act or what we call sexual assault from rape, because rape is always done by a man against a woman. Suppose a woman cannot rape another woman, at the same time, man cannot rape another man. It is an unnatural kind of offense if a man actually does sexual assault against another man, but that is not rape. For rape, it should be a man against a woman. If there is a woman against woman, that is not rape. Similarly, a man against man is not rape either. So that is something very important. Then, in the course of sexual act, the earlier definition of rape, before Nirbhaya incident. Obviously, after Nirbhaya incident, there a Criminal Law Amendment Act was enacted. There were amendments in the criminal laws which actually changed the definition of the sexual act, the rape, within the rape. Earlier, before 2013, only penetration of the male sexual organ into the female sexual organ was considered penetration, in the sense that only that particular behavior was considered most important and essential ingredient of rape. Until and unless a man does not penetrate or insert his sexual organ into the sexual organ of a woman, it it was not considered as rape. But now, in the new definition, in the definition that we have in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which actually comes from the definition which was changed after 2013, it includes all types of sexual act, like insertion of not only male sexual organ, but any organ or object, not only male sexual organ, but any organ or object, if it is inserted into a woman's body, and not only women's sexual organ or vaginal penetration is required. If it is inserted into anus, it is inserted into labia majora, or whatever the case may be, it constitutes rape. Similarly, applying mouth to any organ, to any sexual organ of a woman is considered rape. Similarly, if a body of the woman is so manipulated to create some kind of penetration, that is also considered as rape. So there is a very broad definition. Any sexual act can be considered rape if it has penetration of any kind, penetration of not only a sexual organ of a man into a sexual organ of woman. If any object is inserted or any part of the body is inserted into a sexual organ of a woman, that constitute rape. If mouth is applied, that is considered sexual organ. If a woman is compelled to do those things, that is also considered as sexual act, and that is considered as a, a sexual act within the meaning of this provision. Okay, so the definition, the whole idea of penetration has been expanded, and all sexual acts imaginable, I believe, will fall within this particular definition if there is any kind of penetration. Not only vaginal penetration, or what we consider in traditional sense as sexual act, but all sexual acts, all types of penetration inside the organ of a woman is considered as rape. Okay, that is not rape but a sexual act, because the rape will require the other leg of the offense as well. जो दूसरा part है इसका consent वाला, which is the more important part. Now this defines whatever sexual act is, and then it must have another aspect, that is lack of consent. Now बच्चों, whatever sexual act is done against a woman, if it is consensual, then obviously it is not rape. But if it is non-consensual, then it becomes rape. We'll discuss those circumstances. First of all, the provision says if a sexual act is against a will of the woman. Now, there is a little slight difference between consent and will. Consent we understand. If she has not consented freely, if she has not given consent, she was forced, she was subdued, in that case it is obviously rape. Against the will, meaning thereby that, let's say, suppose somebody has taken the consent without leaving her the choice, means she will face some repercussion if she does not consent. Like if there is a person who is, let's say, is a superior in the job of that particular woman. A woman is employed at a particular place, and she has a boss which says that, okay, fine, you have two options, either to have sexual act with me, or you will be fired. Now obviously she will, and even if she gives the consent because of some tragedy or some, obviously if she is compelled, she has economic necessity or anything like that, and she consents, still that sexual act is against her will. So will is something that is your internal feeling, while the consent is something that you expressly expressly give. So I give the consent by words or by actions, but at the same time, if the woman was unwilling and her consent was obtained by pressuring her or in any other way, that is considered as rape. So the consent and will both are required. If a woman is unwilling, but she consented, let's say because of economic necessity, if she was threatened, anybody in whose life and well-being she is interested, um, in anybody's life and will she is interested, if she has to do something, sometimes woman has to do that sexual act, has to consent to that sexual act against her will, that will also considered as rape. That is something very important. Then, consent, if it is obtained by using force, if her person, property, or any person whose life she is interested in, if anybody is threatened with harm, and then her consent is taken, obviously that consent is not valid. At the same time, if she is defrauded and her consent is obtained, that is also not considered a valid consent. So this is very important. So consent must be free, consent must be given, and it must be willingly given. Willingly matlab the internal feeling should be there that yes, I want to be involved in this sexual act with my will. Even if she's by words she said yes, but let's say her yes was not free, in the sense that the woman was unwilling to have that sexual act, but because of some compulsion she said yes, that will not be considered a valid yes. So that is why the consent part is very much important. Whenever a woman is performing sexual act, it is also the duty of the man to ensure that not only she is only saying yes by mere words, but she is willing for that sexual act as well. If she is not willing that for that sexual act, if she is somehow compelled, if somehow her choice is restrained, if she is not doing that freely, in that case, it will not be a valid consent and it will constitute rape. That is something which has to be kept in mind. Okay. Then, consent is also vitiated by the fact if her husband is impersonated by someone. If a particular person is there and he impersonates the husband of a woman. Now, but this particular provision is not no longer relevant now because it is very difficult to impersonate. But let's say somebody does that, or 50 years, 100 years back, when before marriage, obviously the woman was not familiar with who her husband is. Then somebody comes and he says that I'm your husband, I am legally married to you, and thereby obtains the consent. That consent is also considered illegal and it will constitute rape. Now, see, this particular provision has a very historical, or what we say, it has some reference in an epic as well. In Ramayana, many of you are familiar with the story of Ahilya. Now, Ahilya is the wife of Rishi Gautam, and Indra, while went to Ahilya impersonating her husband, the Rishi, and the Gautam Rishi found out, and he cursed Indra, cursed Ahilya, and in anger, obviously. And then the Ahilya, I finally attained salvation when Shisham came to that place and touched that stone, that particular rock, because Ahilya was converted into a rock by the shrap or curse of Shri Maharshi Gautam, by the lotus feet of Shri Ram, that patthar, that stone, that became Ahilya again. So obviously this was a case of impersonation. It was Indra impersonated. Indra, who is not very known for his morality in these terms. He is loose character uh, deity. Many of his actions are very morally questionable. You know? So in that case, it is what actually he did was impersonation of the husband of a woman. So that if that happens in today's time, it will be falling in this particular provision. Impersonation of the husband is considered to be an act by which the consent of woman is vitiated. So if somebody goes to a woman, says that I'm your husband, woman gives consent because of that assertion, that will be considered rape. Then we have intoxication or insanity. Suppose if a woman, because of temporary or permanent insanity, or she is intoxicated, and thereby her consent is no longer free. In that case, any sexual act with her is rape, irrespective of the fact that whether the boy was intoxicated or not. Let's say there is a girl and there is a boy, and they are both intoxicated, and then they had sexual relationship. Now understand very carefully. while the girl's consent is not valid, the boy will not be saved by this defense of intoxication, because voluntary intoxication is not a defense. So the boy will be punished for rape because you took voluntary intoxication. So obviously the general exception of intoxication will not apply. And here the girl, because the girl was intoxicated, her consent is not valid consent. So tomorrow, after gaining her senses, if she goes to the police and says that I was raped, the man will definitely be punished, irrespective of the fact that they both were drunk. So if a woman is intoxicated, and she's obviously intoxicated to an extent where it can be considered that she is not capable of giving a valid consent, in that case, any sexual act with her is rape. Unfortunately, there are many instances in which women are drugged and then raped. There is something called a rape drug. That drug is given to a woman, and after that she loses the whole consciousness, and she uh, doesn't actually remember what has happened to her. She enters into a state of trance, and then she is sexually abused. This actually happens. That is why it is said that whenever you go to a bar or you go to a public place, do not accept drinks from stranger. That means, obviously, if it is coming from the bartender, then it is fine. But if somebody else is giving you a drink, one should never accept that. So intoxication, but if a woman is intoxicated in any way, or she suffers from any type of insanity and soundness of mind, she is delusional, she is obviously drunk, intoxicated, or she is under schizophrenia, she is under a panic attack, or whatever the case may be. If she is permanently or temporarily insane, obviously the capability of giving consent is reduced, and therefore any sexual act with her will constitute rape. Then we come for statutory rape. Now, what is statutory rape? Now, statutory rape is any sexual act with a woman who is less than 18 years of age. This is very important. Even a consensual sexual act with a woman who is below 18 years of age is rape. There is no defense to say that the girl consented. That girl's consent is not a valid consent. Now, sometimes many cases comes where young couples like 17, 18-year-old schoolgirls, they indulge into a sexual relationship, and obviously the boy is also a minor, girl is also a minor. So there was actually a proposal for reform in our laws which had that Romeo clause that if a minor girl is having a relationship with minor boy, it should not be considered rape unless it was non-consensual. But obviously we rejected that idea. So if the girl is also minor and the boy is also the minor, and it is rape because of the statutory limit, it's not actually rape because the consent was there, but it is rape because the statute says that it is rape. It is not per se rape, because it is not non-consensual. There is consent, but statutory rape is the girl is a minor, then any sexual act with her rape, irrespective of the fact that whether she consented or not. But when the boy is also a minor, there is some leniency in the sense that the boy is tried under Juvenile Justice Act, and if under Juvenile Justice Act, if there is a consensual relationship, I have not seen any juvenile board agreeing to send the boy to jail. They are very lenient in that case. They understand that yes, young people, hormone and something like that. But if the boy is a major, if the man in that relationship is a major, then it is very difficult to get uh, bail sometimes, or to get an order of acquittal. It is often categorized as rape. It is very simple statutory rape if a man has a relationship with a minor girl. It is as simple as that. So that is why the legal age has to be kept in mind at all the times. Whenever a person actually attempts to pursue a woman or even receive sexual advances or advances from a woman, the one thing that should be kept in mind is the age. No minor. Absolutely neither party should be a minor, because both IPC and POCSO Act, they both are very strict in that particular domain. Third is unable to communicate consent. Ignore the spelling mistake, but unable to communicate consent means if a woman, because of some reason, because of any problem, she is unable to communicate consent. Means she is not in a position. Suppose a woman is asleep, and either she is intoxicated nor she is insane, but she is obviously, if she is asleep, in that case, she is unable to communicate consent. In those cases, the sexual act done with her will be considered rape. Okay, so if she is unable to communicate consent, she is not in a position to say yes or no. In that case, any sexual act with a woman will be considered rape. So that has to be kept in mind. This is very important to understand that not only there should be consent, there should be positive consent. If she is incapable of giving consent, there is absolutely no question of that sexual relationship being consensual, because she is not in a position to give consent. Yes. Now there's one important understanding. Just because a woman cannot speak, that does not mean she is incapable of giving consent. A woman who is mute or suffers from any disability, she cannot speak, she can communicate consent by non-verbal means, and that will be considered a valid consent. If does not she is not saying yes by words because she cannot speak, that does not mean that she cannot give consent. So she has to communicate the consent by non-verbal means. But if a woman is incapable of communicating consent because she's, let's say, she's in coma, she's asleep, so in those cases, it will be considered rape. Okay. So just because a woman cannot say, that does not mean that she cannot consent. She can consent. But if she is not capable of giving consent, means she is not in a position to give consent because of some mental issue. She is asleep. She is not conscious enough to give consent. That is something very important. Now, obviously, rape has some aggravated forms. Aggravated forms means the actions which make the case even more serious. It makes the crime even more heinous. Now, first is by police officer. So, if a police officer commits rape while in police station, or in any area in which he has authority, or to any woman who is in his custody, now that sexual act is a more heinous, is an aggravated form of rape. So there is higher punishment for that. Obviously, he's rakshak. If he becomes bhakshak, that becomes a huge problem. So police officer, if he commits that act, that's a huge problem. Then we have public servant. Public servant, in of any form. Suppose he's a um, the district magistrate. He's a public servant in the sense he's in charge. He's an authority. Any kind of authority he has, and he abuses his authority in order to commit sexual act with a woman who is uh, in his custody or in his charge, that is considered as rape. Then obviously members of armed forces. They, because the members of armed forces are highly honored, and so that is why they have a higher degree of responsibility. So when the members of armed forces, while on duty, they commit any sexual act of any sexual violence, that is considered as an aggravated form of rape. That is considered a very heinous act. And obviously, there are very, very rare instances of such actions. Obviously, enemies of Bharat, they are always in a hurry to portray the Indian army in a very negative light. Obviously, there are many people who will um, perpetuate this lie that Indian army is involved in many of such instances. But such cases of armed forces actually committing such is extremely negligible. Extremely negligible. Means the cases are so rare that that is not even considered a problem. Indian army is the most professional army of the world. We have the largest volunteer army, and every army person is a very honorable person, and they serve with dignity and honor, as in the tradition of Indian army. So if you come across a news, let it be verified. The army has checks for to avoid these types of situations. So many a time this is only a propaganda, but nonetheless, it is an aggravated form of rape. Then we have management or staff of public institutions. Now, public institutions include hospitals, they mental hospitals, the hospital, normal hospitals. Then we have shelter homes. Then we have juvenile homes, the women hostel, the hostel of the universities, schools, colleges. Anybody who is in the management or staff of any public institution, generally where the women are there for safe custody they are there for safety purposes in hospitals. If such an act is done, then it is considered as aggravated form of rape, obviously, because those people are equally, they have the responsibility of protecting the women who are there in those public institutions. There are some cases in which such heinous crimes have been committed. Like recently, we saw a lady doctor in Kolkata. We had a case of Chandrima Das, who was raped in a guest house, in a railway guest house, a Bangladeshi woman. So that was also considered a very heinous case. Then we have any person in position of trust or authority. See, there are cases in which a particular woman entrusts a particular person, in the sense that, let's say, there's a woman and she trusts a relative of hers, or she trusts a teacher. So if a teacher, a relative, a spiritual guru commits this heinous act of rape, that is considered as aggravated form of rape. We recently saw the cases of certain people who were obviously spiritual gurus, who portrayed themselves as spiritual guru, and eventually it was found that they committed some of the most heinous acts, that is actually one can fathom. So obviously, if a person is a position of trust or authority, as a teacher a person is an authority, as a relative, as a parent somebody is an authority, in that case any sexual act done by them, any act of rape committed by them, is an aggravated form of rape, and obviously higher punishment will be attracted. Then we have rape committed during communal or sectarian violence. If there's a communal riot or there's a sectarian violence going on, and doing that as a political tool, if rape happens, you know, see, the using sexual violence as a political tool is a very old instrument. That's why the concept, when the Mughals came in India, the foreign armies came in India, the first thing that they used to do, if they conquer a particular place, if they kill people, the first thing that they used to do is to rape women, so as to subdue them. That is considered a shame and insult to the whole community. That is why we have the glorious parampara of Jauhar. Many of the women used to throw themselves in fire because they knew if they'll survive, they'll be raped multiple times by the army. We have this glorious example of Mother Padmini, who committed Jauhar in order uh, to protect themselves from the army of Khilji. So people do, in communal and sectarian violence, people use rape as their political tool, and that is considered a very heinous act. That is why it is aggravated form of rape. Then we have, obviously, as it is clear, um, pregnant or disabled woman. If a person commits rape on a pregnant woman, that is even heinous. That's obviously a very heinous act because of obvious reasons. And if he commits an act on a woman who has some physical disability, in that case, if she is differently able, that is also considered a very heinous act of rape. Because obviously there is no need to explain the reason. We can all understand why it is an aggravated form of rape. Then, then we have that if rape is committed, uh, and while committing the rape, if a woman is seriously harmed, means some grievous injury is inflicted on her, or she is maimed, or she suffers from some permanent damage, in that case, that rape is considered to be aggravated form of rape. And secondly, repeated acts of rape. Sometimes those who are sexual offenders, they try and keep the woman in control and commit those multiple instances of rape on her over a period of time. You see, there was a case in which a particular woman was blackmailed with inappropriate pictures of her, and again she was compelled to perform sexual acts, and these things happen all the time. So repeated acts of rape, every act is a separate count of rape, but it is an aggravated form of rape as well. So repeated acts of rape is also considered an aggravated form, which there is a higher punishment. A man is subjected to a higher punishment if they commit repeated acts of rape. Okay. Now let's talk about the punishment part. The punishment part, understanding punishment part is very important. Now, what is the punishment for rape? Plain and simple, going plain and simple. If you will go by the instances of BNS, as you see earlier in IPC Indian Penal Code, the punishment for rape was mere 7 years. You see how problematic it was that the punishment was only 7 years. But after the 2013 amendment, the punishment was changed and the punishment was enhanced. And now the punishment for rape is, obviously I'll narrate, give me a second. Yes. The punishment is 10 years minimum. The minimum punishment is 10 years, which is extendable up to life imprisonment. Anybody who commits rape, not with aggravated rape, those who commit rape will be punished for 10 years to life imprisonment. That person might be given, and also be liable to fine. And the fine that is collected is used for the welfare of the women, means that the rehabilitation and therapy and whatever help she needs, that all the fine that is collected is given to that particular woman. Then we have the instances of aggravated rape. Now, aggravated rape punishment will be not less than 10 years. Obviously, the minimum punishment is 10 years, but it may extend to life imprisonment. And in that life imprisonment, the life imprisonment will be imprisonment till death. Means that the person will not be released before his death. Means there is no instance that the government can reduce the sentence. Generally, even if a person is given life imprisonment only, that person can be released after a period of time. Earlier it was 14 years, now it is 7 years. That person can be released on the basis of his good conduct. But if a person has committed aggravated rape, the life imprisonment that they are given is a life imprisonment in which there is no possibility of remission. Means that person cannot be released earlier. Even if he is a very model prisoner, he will not be released, and the person will die in jail. So it is imprisonment till death is the form of aggravated rape. It means imprisonment for the remainder of that person's natural life. The person will not be released in any circumstance. So that is something very important. So aggravated form of rape, the punishment is higher. Then we have one more special form of aggravated form of rape, in which a rape is committed with a girl less than 12 years of age. So if the girl is less than 12 years of age, then the punishment is death penalty, life imprisonment or death penalty straight away. Any sexual act done with any rape that is committed in respect of a child who is less than 12 years of age, or a woman who is or he causes the death of the woman in the case of a rape, or commits rape on a woman who is in persistent vegetative state, in coma or something like that, in that case the punishment is death penalty. So the death penalty, it's a death penalty offense. So this is very important to understand. Aggravated form of rape, higher, we have to create some kind of deterrence for that. That is why we have death penalty for rape. Also, we have death penalty for gang rape. Gang rape, if more than 2 or more people commit rape in collusion, that is considered as gang rape. And in the cases of gang rape, the punishment is again may extend to death penalty, or obviously life imprisonment to death penalty will be there. So that is why we have aggravated form of rape, something very important and to understand. So So the person who commits a rape can be punished under law with various punishments. Under POXO Act also the punishment is there, and the punishment of doing penetrative sexual assault against a minor. If a see what is special with the POXO Act? Let me clarify. First of all, POXO Act is a gender neutral act. Means a sexual act done with a boy of less than 18 years or a girl with less than 18 years, it is punished in the same way. So, in case of sexual assault, uh, penetrative sexual assault done against a boy or a girl, the punishment is 10 years, perhaps. 10 years, and obviously, aggravated form of it is punished with life imprisonment. The POXO Act is very quick in the terms of procedure. Means if anybody commits an offense under POXO, they are tried under special court and the punishments are very quickly handed out. So the investigation is done very quickly and the trial starts promptly and there is no delay. So that's why this POXO Act is very potent and very powerful because there is no delay. And what's the difference between POXO Act and IPC? See, it is gender neutral. Both for a boy and a girl, if they are sexually assaulted, the punishment is there. And obviously, there are various kinds of sexual act. There is penetrative sexual assault, aggravated penetrative sexual assault, and then we have sexual harassment. All those punishments are there. We will have a separate lecture on POXO, but till now, only the difference that we have is gender neutrality of the same. Now, there are certain exceptions. There are two primary exceptions of rape. All sexual acts are rape. There are two exceptions. Number one is any surgical procedure is not rape. Let's say there is a surgeon and he has to insert any medical instrument inside the body of the woman. That is not considered as rape. So obviously doctors, they are exempted from this particular logic when they are actually doing a bona fide surgical procedure. That is the first exception. The second exception is a wife of a person. Marital rape is not rape in the sense that if person who commits the sexual act or which will otherwise be rape even without consent, without against the will, but the person who is doing that act is the husband of that woman, and that woman is not a minor, means above 18 years of age. If a person has a wife who is a major, obviously 18 साल से ज्यादा उम्र है उनकी and she is a major and a sexual act is committed, a sexual assault is committed even, that is not considered as rape. Some people consider it abhorrent. This is very problematic. Rape is rape. There should be no marital exception. Means if a husband commits rape on the wife, it should be punished in the same way. Many people argue because the same stigma or same issue is faced by that particular same. It might be painful in the similar way for the woman. But some people say, see, there is a sanctity of a marital life, and sexual act done against the wife, it is different from rape in two, three ways. Number one, that it does not have a social stigma. If a husband has even commits sexual assault against the wife, it will not be considered a stigma in the society. That woman will not be seen in any in a way. She'll not be considered to be have been made profane or उसको अपवित्र कर दिया, ऐसी बात नहीं है. People actually see that marital intercourse in a very accepted way. So she will not suffer any judgment in the eyes of society. Society judge नहीं करेगी फिर उनको. दूसरा is that if a stranger commits a sexual assault or sexual act, suppose if a child is born, that child will be illegitimate and obviously it will be a stigma for the woman. But obviously if the husband commits sexual assault on the wife, a child is born, that child will be legitimate, have all the rights, will have social acceptance and everything. But it does not take away anything from the pain of the woman that she suffers. And there's also one very practical aspect, that in case of strangers, the evidence or proof of rape is rather simplistic. It's easier to find evidences, because if you can prove that there was sexual assault and the wife says and the woman says it was not consensual, obviously the charges of rape are proved by that way. But in a case of marital relationship, there is an expectation of sexual relationship. In a marriage, there is an exception, or the society or the law even presumes that husband and wife, they are having regular sexual intercourse. So in that case, proving the lack of consent will be very difficult, because it is very difficult to actually peep inside the bedroom of a couple. A married couple is there. To have evidence of forceful sexual intercourse is very difficult to get. So because of those reasons, till now the courts and the parliament is not very keen to actually include marital rape in the definition of rape, or simply delete the marital exception. But at the same time, I believe the society is progressing in that way that someday, 10 years later, 12 years, 20 years later, this might be recognized as rape. This particular marital exception can be done away with. Recently, I believe Chhattisgarh High Court gave a judgment that sexual act, although brutal, sexual act are not rape if committed against wife. It obviously, many people criticize this judgment, but obviously it is not that simple. The sanctity of marriage or sanctity of family, that is also social reality. How people perceive it is also very important. Some people say that this will break the marriage. Already, the laws for the protection of married women are misused. We recently had the case of Shri Atul Subhash. There is a man who committed suicide because he said that I am harassed by law by my wife, and my wife is legally harassing me. So if it becomes rape, if the rape law, this marital exception is excluded, and if it will be allowed that a woman, if a wife can actually file a rape case against the husband, what will be the position and how will protect it from abuse is a separate issue. So obviously, society will eventually, I believe, mature and many laws will change. But as of now, there is marital exception in BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. We have not included, or we have not done away with marital exception. Okay. So I hope you got some idea about this particular aspect. So keep learning. There are other offenses against women that we'll learn in the next class. Till then, thank you so much. Keep learning. If you have any doubts, any issues, please reach me at animesh@mpdnlu@ac.in. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next class.